My first writing job, I was 27 years old, and I reached out to him and asked him would he meet with me. And he met with me over lunch. He didn't know me from Adam. He took his time to just meet with a young scribe, right? But prior to that, when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, there was no one who really looked like me that was writing for a major daily newspaper. And so for me to be that for these young people and inspire them, because we need younger voices, we need new voices, because hey man, I'm 50 now. I ain't getting no young out here in these streets.
We're not young voices anymore, Toriano. I'm gonna
we
throw that
old
out
fogies
there.
At this point. We're not cool.
Well, welcome to the News Nirvana podcast. I'm your host, Nick Parker. The News Nirvana podcast features conversations with media professionals from across the country, highlighting our ever-evolving business models and showcasing the strong and effective journalism produced each and every day. This podcast is made possible to you by the generosity of Blocks Digital. Blocks Digital empowers content producers to connect with their worldwide audiences at scale and continuously transform to achieve their business goals. Contact Blocks Digital today to learn more about how they can help you thrive. Connect with them at blocksdigital.com. Hello and welcome back to the News Nirvana podcast. I'm your host, Nick Parker. With me today, Toriano Porter, opinion writer for the Kansas City Star. He has been at the Star since 2016. Full disclosure, we know each other a little bit. Our paths have crossed over the years. We are both former Lee Summit Journal employees, a small community paper in a suburb of Kansas City. We've covered a lot of the same things over the years. But Toriano, this is the first time I've really, sat down and really talked to you, get to know you a little bit.
Sir.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
I specifically want to talk opinion writing,
okay.
And I want to dig into that. But first, I kind of want to do a little bit of just kind of let people know who you are. I think you have an interesting story. You've told a ton of stories over your career. I forgive you for your background. You're a St. Louis, Missouri native.
Yes.
I forgive you for that, and I'm glad that you wore Mizzou colors today.
Absolutely.
And not St. Louis
Cardinal
colors.
I got the memo. I'm a diehard Mizzou fan, which is interesting part of my story. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in South St. Louis, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I attended the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg. I majored in journalism, minored in creative writing, but I was a football player. Right, and so, let me take that back. I was a 3-sport athlete back in high school, right?
Well, you don't short
back
yourself.
In high school, right? And so, but coming up in St. Louis in the 80s, it was all about baseball. And so I fancied myself the next Ozzie Smith, or in this area, Frank White or whatever.
You got a little height on Ozzie.
Yeah, but back then I wasn't as tall, right? And so eventually they moved me to center field, and but I was a baseball player growing up. But again, I played 3 sports, and sometime between my junior and senior year of high school, these college coaches started paying attention to me as a football player. I was a decent wide receiver, but I like playing defense better. I like hitting people versus getting hit. And at some point, I got scholarship offers, right? But they were like Missouri Western, Northwest Missouri before they were
they became Northwest Missouri
champs, yeah, and Central Missouri. But I was disappointed because as a journalism major that I was interested in, and as a football player, I wanted to go D1. I wanted to go to the state school, Mizzou.
Right.
That was my dream school, but they didn't recruit me. So I tell a lot of the kids today that's student athletes in high school, go where they want you, go where you're going to play, and go where they're going to pay for your school. So I eventually went to the University of Central Missouri, and that's kind of how I got started in this whole journalism game. I wrote for the Muse Skinner, which is the campus paper up there. After I played football, and I did not go to the NFL. I did not get drafted or try out. Reality hits sometimes like you aren't that good, And so I covered the baseball teams down there and the football teams down there for 2 years. And actually, in 1999, I won first place from the Missouri College Media Association for sports writing.
There you go.
I actually beat people from Mizzou. So that's my claim to fame. There we have it.
Look, as someone who also was in the Missouri College Media Association, I was at Missouri Southern, so just
there you go.
south of of you
And
there.
I actually played against a couple of guys from Missouri Southern. You may remember their names. James Thrash was one.
Yep.
He played for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Commanders now, the DC franchise, for a couple of years. And then there was Richard Jordan, who was a defensive end from Detroit Lions. Yeah.
The interesting part of that is Richard Jordan was one away from being Mr. Irrelevant. He was drafted second to last.
Yeah.
And
7th round, yep.
And he did practice squad for Detroit
Yep.
and Kansas City, I
Yep.
think 3 or 4 years. Yep. James Thrash, undrafted, played 10 years in the league.
Played 10 years in the league.
Still works for the league.
Wow, that's amazing.
Does some consulting work for the league. So
That's
he had a heck of a career. As a receiver.
I know. He was fast, man. He was fast. Oh, he was fast.
Yeah.
But anyway, when you said Missouri Southern, that's what brought that up. Yeah.
Well, we can talk later about those. I can tell you some James Thrash stories.
Right.
But as you came up, you made your way to Kansas City, and now you are an opinion writer, and I'm curious about that because I feel like a lot of us in the news industry don't really focus on that as much anymore. The Star still has its editorial board. You are a member of that editorial board. And I'm not saying it's a thing of the past that everybody does it. I'm not the old guy that doom and gloom everything, but I think it's different. Do you feel like it's different?
I have to tell you, Nick, coming up in an industry, man, my goal is to write about sports. I would have been fine being a high school sports reporter, but my career path kind of took me into hard news. Started off in the North County Journal in St. Louis as a hard news reporter covering education and business. My first byline ever was on February the 25th, 2001. George W. Bush came to school in St. Louis County. That's my first ever byline. So it's like, it's only up from here, right?
That's great.
But that job, I was fired within 6 months. My editor called it insubordination. She wanted me to cover a kayaking event. Instead of doing that, I covered a celebrity basketball game the rapper Nelly was throwing. That was on a Sunday. I turned it in on a Monday. I was fired on a Tuesday. That's how that started. And so the next 5 or 6 years in St. Louis, I just was doing a bunch of what you would call freelance work, just trying to build my portfolio, build my, repertoire, if you will. I covered entertainment a lot. I covered some sports, hard news. Clark McCaskill versus Jim Talbot stands out. So it was that
was a fun time to cover the Missouri politics.
Yeah, absolutely. It still was a swing state at that point before it went all the way where it is now. But I was just cutting my teeth. And at some point, I decided to move to Kansas City. Now, I have a joke I like to tell people about when they ask me, why did you move to Kansas City? I always say 2 things, a girl and a job. I no longer have either. But anyway, I got here in 2007. The Independent Examiner hired me, which was a breakthrough for me because in St. Louis, I had only had 6 months worth of suburban community newspaper experience and freelance work. And I applied for a cops reporter position with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And the recruiting person there told me I needed to go somewhere in a smaller market and get some daily newspaper experience. And at the time, the Examiner was publishing 5 or 6 times a week, so it was considered a small daily. That was a game changer for me. And so I came up here in 2007. I did 2 years on the city beat over there. Again, I didn't realize as action-packed as Independence was. I cover more than just city council meetings, right?
Right.
Drive-by shootings, homicide. It was wild, man. What you would call police pursuits.
Right.
I cut my teeth. But I had an opportunity to become the assistant sports editor there. At the Jason Tartward, I believe is his name, after he left. And so for 2 years, I covered high school sports, the MCC Blue River soccer program, and the Kansas City Chiefs. But this was a little bit of everything. This was the Todd Haley experiment, though.
Yeah.
It was the worst time to ever cover the Chiefs. But because of cutbacks in the industry, and I can only cover the home games.
Right.
But to be in the press box at Arrowhead Stadium, I could have retired right there. I felt like I made it. I'm in the league now,
Right.
And so I did that for 2 years, and cutbacks got me. I got chopped. I got my head chopped off. I got laid off by the Examiner. So that would have been 2007 to 2011, and right after that, I started doing freelance football work for the Lee Summit Journal, the publisher. Then the next room was John Bedoin. And so, me and John had crossed paths during that examiner time, and he allowed me to do some stringer work in covering high school football. And so at some point, the business education reporter from the Journal left and went to the Biz Journal. God rest his soul. I think it's Rob Roberts is his name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I applied. I was out of a job for about a year. I applied for the job. I got it. And I came out to Lee Summit to cover education and business. Now, here's the thing with that. Because I know McClatchy owned the Journal, my plan was to spend 2 years out here and go downtown to the big show, right? Call me the Bubba Starling of the newspaper industry. Hot, I figured I would spend 2 years in the minors, and I was going downtown. Well, it didn't happen like that. I spent 4 years out here, man, and it was probably one of the most frustrating times that I've ever had as a journalist, a professional journalist, because at the end of the day, I believed in myself. I knew I could do the work. I just needed that opportunity to show the big dogs downtown that I could do the work, and a couple of different things happened. A, we sold the building out here.
Right.
And they moved everyone downtown, right? The old brick building where Ernest Hemingway and Walt Disney worked, And I'm like, okay, I'm in here. But they sent us way in the back, and I don't know if this is a PG-rated show, but I'm going to say something. They put us in the dunce table. They put us way in the back, away from everybody else. And, oh, man. And I just was, like, frustrated, right? And so I remember I applied for the high school sports reporter position at the Star. Again, I just wanted to cover sports. And I know the last person who covered high school sports before me was a gentleman by the name of Therese Paylor. Well, I remember Therese covering high school sports, then going to the Mizzou beat, then going to the Chiefs beat, then getting hired by Yahoo News to cover the NFL.
Well, and that was the Star had quite a pipeline for that back in the day.
Candace Buckner, she's now at the Washington Post.
Jeff Passan.
Oh, another guy, Greg. Oh, my God. Greg's going to kill me. He's in Phoenix now.
Sam is now the VP for the Royals for communications.
So you saw, and I saw that. I witnessed that because at the end of the day, I've been reading the Kansas City Star newspaper since I was 18 years old, since I first enrolled in Warrensburg. Back then, we didn't have the internet. Right. So I was not getting the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. They would have to mail the Post-Dispatch to the library down on campus. So we wouldn't get it till like 3 or 4 days later. And so I read the Star every day. And I became and of course, Whitlock was there at the time, and Poznanski. So the guy who covered sports, he actually wrote about me in college. I forget his name. David Boyce. Oh my God, David's gonna kill me. He's on my Facebook friend list. I was a fan of all these guys, and I read their work religiously. So I set a goal at 18 to work for the Kansas City Star. It's always been one of my goals. But anyway, I get down there, I apply for the sports reporter position, and the sports editor told me I was overqualified. And I was thinking to myself, first of all right, we don't do this game for money, right? We don't do this game for money. For me, it's always been about passion and doing what I love to do. But there's a difference between the community newspaper salary and the entry-level salary at the Star. There's a difference.
There's a big difference.
And I have a family to feed. Plus, I know my work ethic. I know if I get in that door, I'm going to work my butt off. And I'm trying to go to the NFL Yahoo News like Therese did, I want to cover the Mizzou beat and the Chiefs beat, Or at some point become a sports columnist like Mellinger or Whitlock.
Yeah.
Before he went where he went.
Right.
Like, that's a different story.
But that's a whole other conversation.
So this is my mindset. And when they told me that, I was done. Industry-wide, company-wide, I was done. No offense to nobody out there, but I said I can go to Walmart and make more money. I was done. And so I remember calling Therese at the time, and I talked to him. This was 2015, going into 2016, but it was 2015. And I talked to Therese, and I was like, man, I'm leaving. What you mean? I'm leaving, man. I applied for the sports reporter job. I didn't get it. He was like, don't leave. Don't leave. You're in the building. Write something to get their attention, right? And I'm thinking in my head, man, I've been out of Lee Summit for years. Under John Benoit's leadership, we've won all kind of awards. We won the Chamber of Commerce. We won a Small Business Award. We won journalism awards for headline writing and breaking news. Like, I thought I was doing something.
Right.
And what I didn't realize at the time, what I eventually realized, what Therese was telling me was, like I learned as a college football player, you can always do more. So dig deeper. You know, it's bigger than just the community, which we'll call ribbon cuttings. It's bigger than the school board meetings. Do something that's going to get their attention. 2 days later, a little birdie, a snitch, a source, whatever we call them these days, dropped a nugget in my ear that changed everything for me. The superintendent at the time of Lee Summit Schools had a girlfriend who was getting a no-bid contract from the school district. That's an inherent conflict of interest.
Right.
Inherent. So I started digging, did my little request for documents. The law firm was getting hundreds. They didn't even need the money. This law firm had contracts with 32 different school districts around the state. They didn't need the money. But the superintendent dug in. The school board member he was at odds with, who's now the mayor in Lee Summit, Missouri, he was not happy. He dug in, and they basically what I would call had a piss test.
Yeah.
Via the news media. And I broke that story. I was still on the Lee Summit Journal staff and payroll, but I was downtown in the building.
And it got picked up.
And it got picked up by the Star, and that's when they started paying attention. The editor who replaced John after John left, Maria Martin is her name. She's still the suburban editor now. She came up to me one day and she told me, she said, "Hey, listen, I told the big dogs that there's the breaking news reporter position open. I told the big dogs at the Star that you are the guy for their job. This is the salary. Don't let them shortchange you. Go get it." And that changed everything for me. So that would have been August of 2016 that I started that job. And a breaking news reporter is actually what we would call a entry-level position. It's usually for younger reporters. I was 42 years old when I started. But my dream started at 18, and that was 42. So if my math is mathing, that's 24 years worth of grunt work, you know, and never giving up, even though I was this close to giving up. And so that's kind of how I got on the breaking news beat.
How important is it for people to have, you know, you have those colleagues and those mentors and friends in your life that are in the industry that can give you the nudge? You know, if Therese hadn't have said, "Hey, stick it for a little bit longer," I mean, you might not have done that.
No.
And I think a lot of times, you know, our friends are there because we want to gripe at each other about all the layoffs that are happening.
Yeah.
You know, we were a daily paper and now we're printing 3 times a week, or now we're printing once a week. And, you know, all the things that we struggle in the industry and we complain about over and over and over. But to have a friend who also says, "Now you've got more."
Exactly.
And challenged you.
We challenged me, and we needed that. I needed that. And here's the thing. There's a reason why the NFL honored Therese. There's a reason after he passed away. There's a reason why Howard University established a scholarship to his name. The young man was wise beyond his years. He was 9 years younger than me. And I sought out him for advice, you know? And so what he told me, again, it reminded me of what I already knew, what I knew was inside me is you got to push yourself. So that's when I got the bug for accountability journalism, if you will. Holding the power to account. Because at the end of the day, that's our jobs.
Were you doing things like that before the school board story, the superintendent story happened?
No, not really.
Is it that just caught you?
Yeah, not really. I was covering community news for the Lee Summit Journal. Like, it was community focused. It was what I call fluff pieces. There's no way around it.
We do a lot of that in community journalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, I also came up in sports, so yeah, there's something fun about just covering kids playing
games. Yeah.
But you just brought up accountability reporting, and I think it's good to bring that up, because in today's not just news environment, in today's American culture environment, that's harder and harder to do, and to know what's real.
Absolutely.
I mean, is that
absolutely? So it goes back to this, man. Because I've been reading the newspaper since I was 12 or 13 years old. I really have my ear and my pulse on what's real and what's fake, what's credible, what's not. You know, they tell us to diversify and read different news outlets or different media outlets. Well, I have go-tos that I go to that I know is going to bring factual details to their reporting. Like this whole notion that the press is the enemy of the people and all of this, it's almost a fallacy, if you will. Our job is to hold people.
Why do you think it persists, though? Because I think I think you and I and people that are listening to this, we are all immersed in it and likely have been our entire adult lives.
Right.
So we can see it and say, well, logically, I don't understand how anybody buys it. But why do you think it persists? Because it does.
Okay, somewhere along the lines in my 24 years of doing this, someone told me that the average American newspaper consumer reads at a 7th grade level. If that's the case, if that's still the case, then that means these people are easily manipulated. And with the advent and spread of social media and what they call propaganda, I think it's why it's so pervasive now, right?
How do I agree with that. I'm not going to get to the how yet, how we combat yet. But I think, I heard somebody on a different podcast. Now that I want to tell you about it, the name of the podcast is slipping from my brain. But I heard somebody say that they think their thought process of one of the reasons why is because of all of the social media, but also because of all of the cuts that we've had to make. In our thing,
absolutely.
That people don't know when they see the reporter on TV. I'm going to throw out. They see Jonathan Karl for ABC, who was the White House reporter, the guy forever. They see him, they don't know him because they no longer know the guy covering the high school sports team in their neighborhood, right, in their community. They don't know the reporter that shows up to every city council or school board meeting. And that was part of kind of that disconnect between the news consumer and whether you're at a community level or a national level, the reporter.
Right. And there's this concept called community policing where the cops walk the beat and they get to know their neighborhoods and their people in the community. The same thing with the newspaper and the media industry. You get to know your people. You get to trust your people. But if you, like the Star, at some point, we had 200-300 reporters. I don't even know if we have 100 now.
Yeah.
I
mean, I did a little inside baseball because we're both from the same area. I know you and maybe 2 other people left on that editorial side.
Right.
Maybe.
Right. Exactly. And so there you have it. That's a great point you brought up. And that's a factor as well, too. You don't have as many boots on the ground shifting through what we call lies and BS.
So how do we, looking forward, then how do we combat that? How do we, it feels like I'm giving in to say how do we re-earn the trust, but how do we build that back? What are the things that we can do to combat the myth and the fallacy?
Just remain ethical. Don't what I would say, don't skirt the standards that we've set in this industry. Just keep your journalistic approach. If you're news, be news. But in the same token, if you're on the news side, don't be afraid to say that's a lie or that's misleading or that's not true. And I'm starting to see that a lot more these days, but that was a point the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years where we weren't calling out outright lies as a news side.
Oh, no, I agree.
But as in my role and as an opinion writer, that is the greatest thing that I could do at this point is to remain ethical, practice great journalism standards, but also call out the BS.
Well, call out lies.
Yeah.
Call out truth. You just said those things. Do you think, and I think, tell me if I'm accurate here. I think we've fallen into, for several years, into a problem where we tried too hard to both sides, to show two sides to an issue.
Yes.
And are there always two sides? Do you think that we've gone too hard of, I need somebody from the left to comment, I need somebody from the right to comment, and let's put them both in and just call it a day?
Right. What I would say is this: you want to always give the opposition or the other side, quote unquote, an opportunity to chime in on what you're writing about, what you're reporting on. I think that's what we call fairness.
Right.
It's okay to be fair, but you still have to have that discretion. Which again, newspaper reporters or your beat reporters really don't have that discretion, whereas the opinion writers do. And so I think that is one of the reasons McClatchy decided that they were going to invest heavily into opinion journalism. And that's kind of leading up to, what we've been talking about opinion journalism and does it still matter or does it even matter? And I remember being on the breaking news beat in August of 2016, In January of 2017, the McClatchy announced that they were investing into opinion journalism, and they were going to, because our editorial board at the Star had been shuttered.
Yeah.
I think Tony Bird was the publisher, and I think maybe Yale and Louis Duguid were the only two people left, and they basically bought their contracts out because they were making so much money, early retirement, if you will. And so we didn't have a board really. And so McClatchy decided that they were going to invest in the editorial board, and they used the Kansas City Star as the model. So the national opinion editor that they hired, that was over all the publications in McClatchy, they hired her from, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, Colleen McCain Nelson. She was a Pulitzer Prize. She was part of a Pulitzer Prize winning editorial team at the Dallas Morning News, but she covered Barack's 2 terms. And so they hired her from the Wall Street Journal to come to Kansas City. She came, and man, when I tell you, she revamped that editorial board and hired some heavyweights. You know, I don't know if your audience nationwide know who these people were, but I'm going to name drop them anyway. Melinda Hindenburger, she's a Pulitzer Prize winner and a only 3-time finalist in the history of the award. Mary Sanchez at the time was syndicated by USA Today, I believe. Then there was an award-winning guy by a cartoonist named Lee Judge. Then there's Derek Donovan, who was a buzzman down there. And then there's Dave Helling, the longtime political reporter who went from TV to news to the editorial board. And then there was Steve Kraske, he's up to date with Steve Kraske on NPR here, KCUR. I mean, these were heavyweights. And again, I'm just on the breaking news desk. I really want to write about sports. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's going to be a heavyweight board. And at that point, I was like, something's missing. And what was missing from that board was an African-American voice. So I paid attention to that part of it. And eventually, I brought it up. And, at the Star and McClatchy are going to do all this talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and representation matters and all of that. Then you have to put your money where your mouth is, and you have to have tangible action. So I called them, and I challenged them on that. And I had only been in there like a year, And so the way it happened is we went from a we went from a print focus to a digital focus publication in the middle of 2017. They call it reimagining print.
Yes.
Okay. What they said to us was, every person in the newsroom, it's time for you to redefine what you want to be.
The News Nirvana podcast is made possible by the generosity of Blocks Digital. Blocks Digital empowers content producers to connect with their worldwide audiences at scale and continuously transform to achieve their business goals. Contact Blocks Digital today to learn more about how they can help you thrive. Connect with them at blocksdigital.com.
So at the time,
you raised your hand.
At the time, Sean King, the activist, no matter how you feel about him, he was getting a lot of what you would call clicks and views, right? He was being read, no matter how you feel about him. So I pitched to them that I wanted to be a social justice reporter, right? So the big dog at the time, the managing editor of news at the time, said, well, Toriano, everything we do should have a component of social justice to it. And they kind of kicked my little proposal and idea to the side, right? And so I was kind of bummed out a little bit. But the same day, I went to our breaking news editor at the time, Grace Hobson, and I said, Grace, hey, tell me this. What's going on with the editorial board? Like, they need a black voice on there, right? She was like, yeah, I know. We tried to hire somebody from Detroit, but she ended up going back to Detroit, blah, 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 blah. She was like, why are you asking? Are you interested? I said, hell yeah. Mind you, I'd only been there a year. And so she said to me, well, go back, right up. And I'm on a breaking news beat at the time, and I'm on breaking news assignment at the time. Where you're in the newsroom, you got to listen to the scanners, got to watch the news, check Twitter, make sure there's nobody dying or been murdered or there's no fatal car wrecks, breaking news. I don't know if there was breaking news that night because she asked me to go back and draw up a one-page proposal of how I would approach the job. She would get it to the managing editor, Greg Former, and he would get it to Colleen McCain Nelson, who I had never met because, news and opinion is separate.
Right.
We had never talked, never sat down, anything like that. So I went back and I drew up that proposal. I don't think anything happened on the scanner that night, but I don't know. I hope it didn't. So I wrote that, gave it to Grace. She gave it to Foreman gave it to Colleen. This would have been in around, I want to say August of 2017. So September, maybe early September, late August, me and Colleen met. We met at a coffee shop in the Crossroads area of Kansas City. And she asked me a question. She said, "How did you get to the Kansas City Star?" And I said to her, "Do you want the PG version or the real version?"
Wait, that's a good question. And we all have those long, kind of winding roads.
Yeah.
And very few of us have the short trip to that space. I'm curious because you found a hole that needed to be filled.
Absolutely.
And it was one that obviously you wanted to chase it. I mean, you had a reason that you were finding that hole because you wanted it in.
Absolutely.
But that goes back to, I think also though, the approach of opinion journalism. And again, I'm going to say in today's environment, right, especially the last month and a half, to say that I'm going to talk about social justice or I'm going to talk about diversity. How are you approaching these things now? And I think, too, you've got to address some of that difference between, obviously we have a news audience, so they know, but I think that difference between news and opinion.
I'm going to tell you this, man. And Nick, I'm going to tell you, man, my life experience, my lived experience, my background, being a college athlete, coming from what I would call a hard scramble life in South St. Louis. My mom and dad were high school dropouts, man. I was the first person in our family to go to college. My older brother didn't go. My younger brother didn't go. I've been prepared and what I call hashtag built for this, right? But I approached the current times like I approached a wide receiver or a running back on the football field with all I got. I don't have much. I got heart and determination and mental toughness. But I also have a great sense of news and what's newsworthy. And that's been cultivated over the years because, again, I've been reading the newspaper since I was 12 or 13. I know what makes a great story. Now, we have these metrics and we have all these analytics now that tell us what our audience wants, but there's some things you can't shy away from. And I'm going to tell you, I've written, which is online today, the governor of Missouri banned DEI in all state agencies. I wrote that this morning on the train. It's online right now. When the tragic plane crash from Wichita to D.C. happened and President Trump came out and said, quote unquote, DEI, blah, blah, blah. And Roger Marshall, a senator from Kansas, regurgitated that. I called Roger Marshall out because DEI is the new boogeyman now all of a sudden, right?
Right.
And so that's how I'm approaching it. If I feel like it's a bunch of malarkey and BS and misleading, I'm going to call it out.
Do you feel, is there any hesitancy now, obviously the last month and a half since the election has been drastically different, or maybe not different, just more intense is probably a better way. But in the last year or two, do you feel any hesitancy to attack some of those things? And I'll use the town that we're in right now, that I live in and you used to cover. You've poked the bear out here a few times,
Absolutely.
several times over the last few years.
Absolutely.
Beginning almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you feel any hesitancy now just because of how hard the feedback is?
No. I would tell you why. I've written a couple of pieces, opinion pieces, since 2018 when I was hired, January 2018. It's hard to believe. It's been 7 years now, man. When I was 42 when I got there. I was 43 when I started there. I had only one year of what you would call daily newspaper experience. And I remember Colleen McCain Nelson at the time being worried about my lack of daily newspaper experience, right? So I challenged her.
I'm going to insert there and tell you what I like to tell everybody. Dailies are easier than weeklies. Anybody who says you don't have daily experience has never done the other side. Weeklies are harder.
Man, you got to trust me. Not only that, over at the Journal, not only did I have to cover education and business, I had to design the pages.
Yeah.
That gave me a headache. In design? Oh, Lord, man. Don't bring that up. I don't even know why I brought that up. I just traumatized myself. But so she was concerned about my lack of daily newspaper experience. So this is what I said to her. I think I caught her off guard, but I said, would you be willing to train me? Because there is a difference between news reporting and opinion journalism.
Yeah, they're not the same writing.
They're not the same. And she said, well, my editor at the Dallas Morning News gave me an opportunity to be an opinion writer. I would be open to that. Now, I didn't think I would get the job, and I had to interview 2 or 3 more times, but I eventually got the job. And when I tell you they threw me into the deep end, they threw me into the deep end. I was swimming by fire. I'm still learning to this day. I'm still learning, even though I've done it 7, 8 years.
What do you think the hardest lesson of shifting your brain and your writing muscles, your muscle memory, from newsbeat reporting to opinion?
It's the same thing as news reporting. Getting the facts right. You can opine.
It starts the same. You can opine on any subject you want to opine on, but you got to have the basic fundamental facts right. And that is what I had to learn that first year. Right? You don't want to run a correction. You don't want to get anything wrong, because as we know, if you lose credibility that way. So I think that rookie year I learned a lot. And so they threw me in the deep end. You sinking, you swim. And I didn't sink. I'm still swimming though. I ain't drowning, but I'm not Greg Louganis ever yet, right? but working with Melinda and Dave and all these heavyweights that I worked with, and watching their work ethic and how they go about their business, you can't do anything but learn. And so I just been learning. So and I came into it like this hotshot rookie that wasn't going to try to like overshadow people. I was going to learn from them, but I wasn't going to duck. I'm in this position for a reason. I advocated for myself, but also advocated for diversity in the newsroom and diversity in voices, right? And so, man, just taking that and running with that. So that led me up to where I was going with this. I have written some uncontroversial opinions. Once I wrote about Big Slick. I don't know if people know what Big Slick is, but it's this annual, what you would call fundraiser in town that Paul Rudd, a.k.a. Ant-Man, and Jason Sudeikis, Ted Lasso, the Ted Lasso guy. They come back. They're from this area. They come back. They throw it. Well, one day I was looking at the roster of celebrities they were having in town. It was like 32. It was like 32 people. Oh, they bring a ton of their friends into town.
But 28 of them they only had like 2 or 3, what I would say, African Americans. Patrick Mahomes was one. Kurt Menefee was another, and there was somebody else. So I wrote a column that said Big Slick is awfully white. Oh, my God. When I tell you, man, they tried to run me out of town. I had to turn my Twitter notifications off. My emails. Who criticizes a good event? Here was my point I was trying to make. Don Cheadle's from this area. Janelle Monáe's from this area. Remember Maurice Green, the Olympic star? He's from this area. Like, at the time, there was a show called Empire that was on. A guy named Trey Byers. He's from this area.
The kid who brought back Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh, yeah, Morgan. Yeah, Morgan Cooper. And I was like, I like Paul Rudd, but I've never watched Ant-Man, and I've never watched Ted Lasso. But maybe I want to come into
I'm going to do a whole other episode and convince you to watch Ted Lasso. But
okay, maybe I want to come and support, but there's nobody to draw me to it, And that was my point. And man, I took it. There's another one. One more. I'll talk about one more. When they tried to run me out of town, it's a surprise I'm still here, man. Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs. He did some drag racing on the Dallas Highway.
Right.
This dude, allegedly, I would say, but he's already taking responsibility for it. He just got to go through the court system, right? This dude gets into a wreck casually. We've all saw the video. Mm-hmm. Him and his buddies casually walking away from this scene. Okay, now that's bad enough. But a couple of days later, as the first opinion article I wrote on it, I was just saying he's lucky he didn't kill anyone or himself. This is a learning lesson, and we'll wait for more details to come out. Well, more details emerged. And one of the things that caught my eye, he had weed in the car, and he left his playbook behind.
Right.
Sir, you left Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid's playbook behind? That's a fireable offense.
Yeah.
So I wrote an opinion piece that said the Kansas City Chiefs should consider releasing or trading Rashee Rice. Woo! Them Chiefs fans came for me, man. My emails were lit up. You need to go out of town. People were coming at me so hard, it made me feel like I was the one on the highway that crashed and walked away. It was wild, but because of who I am and who raised me and how I was raised, I was able to withstand that. And if I could withstand those two media, those two what you would call criticism or pushback, I can survive anything.
I want to go backward just a little bit, and I know we're going longer than I told you
fine,
we'd go, but I want to go backward a little bit because you said when you chased the opinion job, one of the things you did was you pointed out, hey, there's no one else like you. There weren't other black voices specific to opinion writing and voicing opinions, that can reach out through a major metro newspaper, through whatever. How important is it to have that black opinion voice?
It's very important, man. When I go and when I'm fortunate that a lot of people in the community reach out to me to come and speak to their kids at career days and stuff. Like, I'm a motivational speaker. I get paid to do speaking gigs, but whenever someone from a school district asks me to come talk, or a classroom or career day, it's all about giving back because I feel like representation matters. Now, I remember growing up in St. Louis, there was a gentleman by the name of Greg Freeman. He was a columnist in St. Louis. He was the Metro columnist. My first writing job, I was 27 years old, and I reached out to him and asked him would he meet with me. And he met with me over lunch. He didn't know me from Adam. He took his time to just meet with a young scribe, right? But prior to that, when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, there was no one who really looked like me that was writing for a major daily newspaper. And so for me to be that for these young people and inspire them, because we need younger voices, we need new voices, because, hey, man, I'm 50 now. I ain't getting no young out here in these streets.
We're not young voices anymore, Toriano. I'm gonna
we
throw that
old
out there.
fogies at this point. We're not cool.
Well, and so the part of me that one of the reasons I asked that question is because even though we both came up sports and we both would gladly go cover sports again because it's fun, and also because the best reporters are always come from sports.
Absolutely.
Outside of sports, though, we don't see a lot of black opinion.
No.
And so I think that's what made me curious about it when you said it, because we can rattle off the Stephen A. Smiths, we can rattle off Jason Whitlock, and look, I've known Jason since he first got here, and I don't know him well, but we've covered stuff together, and he has run a gamut and spectrum of opinions,
absolutely,
and things. But we know those handful, but they're all sports.
Yeah. Hey, man, it's funny because someone asked me, was I ever going to write a biography, right? And I'm like, well, the story is yet to be written. I'm still doing it. I'm still in the middle of it, but I understand the importance of legacy and representation. And I want to be a great representation for my family, for my community, for people that look like me, for people that come from hard scrambled lives like me. I was a non-traditional everything. My whole career arc has been non-traditional. I spent 7.5 years as an undergrad. That's a whole other story. We don't have enough time to get into that, But man, so I'm blessed. I'm honored. And again, I'm gonna get a little deep on you because I believe in certain things. God being one, but God doesn't put anything on you can't handle. Again, sports for me is easy. It's fun. It's second nature. It's what I am. It's what I do. That would have been the easy part. Growing up, I had no desire to be an opinion news writer. Maybe a sports columnist.
Right.
But not this. This is something that God put on me. So I'm with that. I walk the walk. I try to back it up with action. I try to be factual and correct, and I try to be hard-hitting and without fear of favor, right? And so if I do that, my legacy will be secure, and hopefully I can influence a lot of people after me, even if it's just 1, 2, or 3, And again, I used to go and just talk about journalism. When I talk to kids now, I'm talking about opinion journalism. And I'm actually, with my slideshow presentation, this is what I tell the kids. in journalism, you have to be able to confirm things and back them up with facts. Everything I'm showing you and tell you, I can back up with facts. Does opinion journalism matter? Yes. There was a guy who sued the independent school district. They locked him up for speaking out of turn at a school board meeting. I wrote about that. I said he shouldn't have been fired. He sued. He won. And he wrote me back and he said, if it wasn't for your story, my lawyers who picked me up would have never found me. Thank you. That's just one example.
Yeah.
I also got a kid I helped. I don't want to take all the credit. I helped put the spotlight on a kid in Kansas who got locked up for 8 years. He got sentenced to 8 years for having 2 pounds of pot. The same judge that sentenced that kid to prison for 8 years also sentenced a drunk driver who killed 2 people to 30 days in jail. Something ain't equating here. Well, this kid with pot was a young black kid. The kid who killed somebody, medical school student at Kansas State. That's not right. So I wrote a piece imploring Governor Laura Kelly of Kansas to commute this young man's sentence. So instead of him doing 8 years, he did 6. He got out in December of 2024. His mom called me. She said, Mr. Porter, I just want to let you know they're going to get my baby out of jail, and I want to thank you, blah, blah, blah. She started crying. I started crying. I guess I could do that now because I'm on the opinion side. I could cry. And those are the things that stand out to me. Those are the things that make a difference. So, you know, I could write about the Chiefs and their fans and the national anthem and the chop they do and all that. That's cool. But those are the stories that matter the most, when I can actually help affect change.
What do you're talking to kids. So what do you see are the future needs of opinion writers? Of doing opinion with the news?
Wow, that's
what do we need to be doing more of? And I think some of it goes back to the original conversation of rebuilding trust, of being a watchdog for the people.
Yeah.
So what do you think we need?
I think it starts with recruiting young people and introducing them. It's like anything else. You introduce a young kid to basketball at 9, 10 years old, or football or baseball or whatever it is, they eventually become in love with it, proficient at it, or whatever. Or you introduce a kid to a different type of career. That's why it's important when I show up for career days. Because maybe a 10, 11, 12-year-old not thinking about a career as an opinion writer.
Right.
But then when you started breaking it down to them, and, you know, when I show up, I'm usually suited and booted.
I don't think I've ever seen you actually in sweats before.
Yeah, I'm usually suited and booted. I was on the train this morning. I was going to stop at home before I came, but the train got delayed. I'm here. You know, I wanted to represent, but usually when I step into the building, I'm suited and booted, got on my finest threads. I'm freshly shaven. I'm talking, and I'm giving them that sauce to making it cool to be an opinion writer, right? So just showing up and hopefully planting seeds. So it starts early, introducing them to the field early. Like, they know about TV. Like, they know Kevin Holmes. They see him every day. You know, they probably know Stephen A. Smith. They see him every day, but they don't know me. I'm on the print side. But showing up, introducing them to it, helping them. Any kid that reaches out, if they want to shout at me for a day, they can't. You know, so I think it's a lot about just introducing them to this possibility. Like I was telling my daughter, who's 14, you don't want to be a journalist? That hurts my feelings. What do you want to be? I want to be a lawyer. Okay. A lot of kids say that, right? So what we do, we introduce them to the field.
I've been disappointed by my own son, who doesn't want to be in journalism.
It's heartbreaking. Who raised you, son? I raised you.
He doesn't like baseball, and he doesn't want to be a journalist. I don't know where I went wrong.
You might have to get tapped, man. You might have to make sure he's yours. No, man, it's crazy. Like, how do you not want to be a journalist? So, I had to name drop on my daughter the other day. Tell her about all the cool people I met as a journalist. Barack Obama, George W. Bush, the rapper Nelly, Jay-Z.
Well, you know, I feel like, though, too, I don't like doing the generational back in my day stuff, right?
Right.
But I feel like, and I didn't get into journalism. I really stumbled into it in college. This was not my plan.
Wow.
The vampires got their teeth in me, and I was
hooked.
Over. Okay. It was over. But when we were younger, being able to think about growing up and writing opinions was the dream. I don't know that that's the case anymore.
No. So again, you know what they want to be now? TikTok influencers.
Yeah.
Social media influencers. So with that, I told the kids the other day, I forget which school I was at. It was some school in Kansas, middle school. Hey, with the advent of the internet, social media, you can be your own news media now. You got a camera, have your mom get you a website, do your little stuff, cover your little middle school basketball games. You can make it fun now. Like, you could be multimedia now. You know, like, it's easier now to print something. Now, you have to get your facts right. You just can't be out here just being willy-nilly.
The technology makes the entry point easy.
Absolutely.
No,
Absolutely. So, you know, you meet these young folks where they at, man. They on social media. So, and that which brings me to a young kid like the Kansas City Defender. No matter how people feel about his publication, that dude started that before he was 30 years old. You know, like, when I was 30, I wasn't starting news publications.
Yeah.
I could tell you that. I wasn't even thinking about it. You know, I have a cousin that lives in St. Louis. He once said to me, when I was around 30, you ever thought about starting your own newspaper? I was like, no.
No way.
You got to have $1 million to do that. $1 million at least. You got to have that to lose.
Yeah, I was in my early 40s when I launched mine, and I still don't know if it was a great idea.
Right. And so for young people, a young person like that to start his own publication and actually have a dent and find his niche, that's impressive. So again, it's just introducing these young folks to the career early, man. I think that'll help. But, you know, if we keep getting beat across our head that fake news or press is the enemy of the people or all of that, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Well, as we wrap up, I'm going to actually change a little bit here,
Okay.
because I like to end on these things.
Okay.
I'm making an effort, a concerted effort, intentional effort the last several months to do this.
Okay.
Give me something about our industry, maybe what you're doing, maybe what's happening at the Star. It could be broader if you want, but that you're excited about, that gives you, you know, some positive energy about our industry and about what we're doing in journalism.
Well, I don't know. I hate to say I don't know. That makes me seem like I don't know what I'm talking about. This is what I'll say to answer that question. There's this new horizon that's coming along, and it's going to affect opinion journalism and McClatchy at the Star. It's called AI.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Literally, 20 minutes before I stepped into your office, I got an email from the big dog at the Star saying that we're about to start having these powwow meetings, and I need to come up with some ideas of how to approach opinion journalism using AI. Because it's unfamiliar to me, I'm not excited. I'm a little bit hesitant because I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Well, you have just continued a streak that's over a year now of every episode somehow we bring up AI.
Okay, there it is. There it is. So in a way, it's new, and it's because, again, I never want to feel like a dunce. I'm going to have to immerse myself into how to use that.
Yeah, you have to use it, and we had an episode probably about a year ago with a couple of people from a couple television companies, and their big thing was start with setting your ethics rules. How am I going to use this? You know, will we use this for creative? Will we just use it for process?
Mm-hmm.
Will we use it for editing? Will we use it, to set those limits first?
Right.
Then dive into the tools, start seeing what you can do and how you can meet those
The
parameters.
needs, yeah, right.
You
And
know,
the needs of your readers.
Absolutely. That you've set. And I will tell you, I use it some. I am a one-person company, right? So
Right,
whether my
right.
production business or my local news thing, I do use it.
Right.
But for me, I try to use it as a tool to refine,
Uh-huh.
or maybe to sometimes I'm stuck.
Okay.
Hey, look, we're all sitting around
Yeah.
writing. It's like, what's that word? Or,
Right.
or
Right.
you know how it is too. You write and you're like, why is that paragraph's 400 words in one sentence?
Exactly.
I need a little bit of help to split
Right.
this up.
Right.
And so I will sometimes get some tips that way. But I, jumping in and figuring out how to use it and to use it within the parameters that you set for your organization, I think is really important.
So for me, it's more of like
also
a
fun.
challenge than it is exciting. But once I get my hands on it and figure out exactly what it is and how to use it, I think the excitement will come, right? Because, again, I don't want to be left behind. You adapt or you perish.
Yeah.
I remember when I was at the Examiner, and what are those little cameras that came out? The flip cameras? Or what?
Oh, yeah. Those old flip videos?
Yeah. They used to say we had to start doing videos with our stories. This was like 2007. I said, well, if that's the order, that's the order. I remember one time there was a fire. I went and covered the fire. Then the next day I went back. I took the little flip cam with me, and I did a walkthrough through the burned down building. You know,
Yeah.
One time there was a news conference at the Independence courthouse. I set that thing up on the tripod. I wrote a little script out, and I act like I was a news anchor. Right? You adapt or you perish.
Well, and we have to learn to do
Absolutely
all of those things. And the new toys are fun, I'll admit. We started off, I told you about the app I'm using right now on our phone to record this, and I will tell every reporter I know about it because it just is easy to use and it enhances everything.
At one point at the Lee Summer Journal, not only was I writing and designing pages, I had to shoot my own photos. So, you adapt or you perish. So I will adapt with this AI,
Yeah, and we learn what we have to learn to keep going.
Absolutely.
Toriano, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Good luck with everything at the Star.
I was going to say, for your people who are out there, if you ever want to follow me, I am on all social media channels. I don't dance on TikTok, though. I'm on there, but I don't dance. At Toriano Porter, that's TorianoPorter, at Toriano Porter on all the platforms. Blue Sky, Threads, X, Facebook, IG. Follow me on IG, guys. I drink a lot of coffee. I have my pages about fun on there. And then also my website is torianoporter.com. Thank you.
You knew my next question, so that's all right. Toriano, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Nick.
That'll wrap us up for this episode. We'll talk to everybody next time. The News Nirvana podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or most any of your favorite podcast apps. The News Nirvana podcast is made possible by the generosity of Blocks Digital. Connect with them at blocksdigital.com. The News Nirvana podcast is produced by Fredcasts. Think, speak, act,